In case you haven't been paying attention, this is what's called Team Rhino of the Sanctification Network, and you'll have to... Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question. That's a Craig answer, so maybe he'll get to that. This is basically kind of the administrative organizational team of the Sanctification Network. And I once again want to make sure you know who we are. Of course, George Acevedo and Ron Watts, Craig Robertson, and you may or may not know Corey. Hopefully you've met him over the course of these 3 days. But Corey Shobe is our Chief Executive Director here at Bay Hope. In other words, he's my boss. So he runs everything around here, but he has graciously volunteered his time and effort and energy over the past 18 months or so to kind of move us from what's called the Sanctification Project to the actual Sanctification Network. And we are very grateful for you giving us that time. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Craig to work through everything that's happening here.
And our primary objective is to answer the questions that we've been gathering up from you all. And about half of you made it through a survey at the before coming to the retreat, and we have those questions. We've also picked up a couple of questions along the way this week. And I have found a new articulation of why we went from the Sanctification Network, project to the network. And originally, the Sanctification Project had this hope that one of us would actually become sanctified. And when that wasn't looking great, we thought we could improve our odds if we invited you all. So, thank you all for being here. We do see you all as entering into the partnership on this movement. And I'll tell you that just right off the bat, when organizations are new, just like when people are new, they can think an awful lot of themselves, but they're still new. And we recognize that we have lots and lots of things that we don't know, lots and lots of things that are evolving. There's no recipe or formula for what we're doing. And so we're learning as we go. And maybe the thing I'm proudest of in this moment is how much growth we've had from our last retreat to this one. And it came from you all observing and asking questions and being a part of this. So we're going to answer questions, but you need to know that we see you as part of us. And so this is us talking. And we may have some questions that need to be put into the parking lot for later. Your waves are a great place to answer some of the questions. And we have a huge variance between experience here. So some of us have been doing this for about 5 years. Some of you started 2 days ago. And so just be aware that we're trying to shape the questions in a way that'll help everybody. And you may or may not get your question fully answered, but it's still important that you continue to ask. In fact, I would argue that questions may be the best thing, way better than statements. So, anyway, what?
My pastor's texting me things.
Wes, behave.
Put your phone.
Wes. Mike, you might have to go back and.
I'll take care of it.
All right, thank you. In the materials that were sent out ahead of time, and if you had trouble getting to them, you got to talk to your wave coach or give me a buzz. It's the first time we've used the format that we used, but half of you made it in, so we know that it's technically possible. And so if you did have trouble getting in, the material shared in that, the values and the mission and the vision that comes from the ministry action plan of the Sanctification Network. And that's something that we built. And these things you can study in more detail if you'd like, and we certainly would love questions. You also can find in there some of the data that we've collected between last retreat and this one. And we're keeping up with a small set of data, and we're going to talk about measurement here in more detail, but you can see in there that there's a growing number of people in worship in our network. And so that's cool. That's good. It's not a movement yet, but it's good. We are also collecting mature data for the first time, and our definition is that a mature person is someone willing to be held accountable, key phrase, willing, to spiritual or emotional or relational, and, I should have said spiritual and missional or relational, and really understanding their calling and being held accountable to it. And as long as they're directionally headed that direction, we say that's maturity. So that's our definition of mature. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. You can see that that data right there has a dip in it and has decreased. And I would argue that the reason for that is we are still learning how to count. Okay, so the data is not that significant just yet. We're still learning how to do this. Attendance has been something that has been part of all your lives since you began. Counting mature data, unfortunately, has just got started, which in my estimation as a guy who studies mission statements is just weird. If that's really the mission and you're not paying attention to it, what are you doing? So that's, I'll try to keep my snark as low as possible, but that, yeah, all right. The number of people that are here is growing, and this is good news for us. We expect that this will plateau at some point when our relationships are no longer attracting people into this network. Ideally, what will cause the network to grow are the disciples. When people see our network having a movement of disciples making disciples, it will be hard to keep people away. And you all know that. So that's where this number is likely to head, if all things go as planned, is that we'll begin to see it plateau over the next little bit as we're using up the relationships that we've accumulated over our lifetimes. And then, ideally, the radiation from God's love and the kingdom of God coming here on earth is going to propel people towards us. They're going to want to know what in the world's going on. And that's what we're hoping for. So that's the data. More out there. First question, and if you weren't here in the fall, then will you see a moose? Will probably make no sense whatsoever. And the best rock band of all time is Rush. I'm sorry.
Aerosmith.
Rush. No, it's Rush. And yes, you will see a moose.
Beautiful animal.
It is a beautiful animal. So there you go. There you go. Getting to some more serious questions, we want to spend a little bit of time. And I've taken your questions and changed them around a little bit, so hopefully they're still on target. But this first question is, when you're building teams, how far outside of the box should you go? And in order to answer that well, you've got to answer what is the box that we're talking about. And so I'm going to give a definition of that. And if this is your definition of box, that when you're building a team, that you should try to find people that have been around a long time in your church, or you're trying to find people that represent a population in your church, or you're trying to put people on a team because they deserve to be on your team for some reason, then I would say we need to go way outside the box. We need to blow the box up completely. Was it yesterday, Wes, that you spoke and you were talking about the team that you first built? There was only 2 on that team that were actually members of that church. Was it 2 or was it 3? It might have been 3. But my point in saying this is that we're trying to actually find people that are spiritual leaders in our teams. And we've spent generations thinking that the population at the church, the mob, is the best place to shop for leadership. And that may or may not be true. The real key to building great teams is to allow this concept that you are actually working with the creator of the universe in the work that you're doing to really drive who you invite into your teams. And they may or may not be at your church just yet. And we'll talk more about that as time is going on, and you've heard yesterday several people give comments on that. But the big concept in building really great teams is that they ought to complement the weaknesses that you have. They ought to really fill out the body of Christ imagery around you. And ideally, this team is going to be one that is able to function at a very high level. And depending on what type of team that you're working on, that can vary, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday. So in the question, how far outside the box should you go? If God puts somebody in your head that you think might ought to be on your team, you probably should call them. You should probably give them a call. And I encourage you not to let time, resources, anything at all stand in the way of that ability to reach out and ask people to be a part of this amazing movement, this amazing mission that really was created by the author of the universe. So keeping that in mind as you're building these teams is just super important. How do you build? Well, the very nature of the teams that we're building may be the most important work that you as leaders of your churches are doing. I just want to say that. Your greatest opportunity for disciple development is in the people that you spend the most time with. There is some evidence that that method is a good one. I referenced Jesus of Nazareth and the movement that he started. And in most other cases, I'm just saying. And the reason is that it's the disciples who make disciples mentality that has really driven the movement. And so as you're building your team and you're thinking about how much energy do I put into the team itself, the answer is there's no more valuable spot for growing in an organization than that. And that is really different than how we have been all developed in the last many decades of the Protestant church. It has really been the heroic solo leadership model, and you heard that yesterday, and you've heard it before, that has driven the methodologies and the processes in which to build teams. So the passionate spiritual discipleship part of that focus means that your leaders need to be first and foremost passionate spiritual disciples. And then number two, if you have that as your actual team members, and I'm not really talking about task operational or directional teams specifically, I'm saying any one of those teams in your church, it's really inappropriate to have somebody on a team that's not headed towards that. And it could cause you to go slower for a while. But that's okay. That's okay. And I just cannot emphasize enough that this is where the real action is. It's why we're here, is because a bunch of goofballs got together, right? All of us. And we started slowly getting our minds around what was most important to us. And that led us to build this map. And now years later, here we are because we were doing that with God and with each other, and it wasn't an I, but a we. And here we go. And this is how it's supposed to work, is that you have to take the time to invest in the team on the front side. It's really not the other way around. And our challenge is that church has been around for thousands of years, right? And we get caught up in the fact that because the church has been around, sometimes it's church with a small c instead of church with a big C, then all we have to do is keep it going. And our job is to try to keep it going instead of really focusing on how do we get connected into a movement? How do we actually create the very same thing that changes culture. So it's just essential that we keep these in mind.
Greg, before you move past question number 2, wouldn't you say also that the answer to that, first and foremost, is that we have to be passionate spiritual disciples and leaders? And I would say as a fairly new coach, that's the lion's share of the work that I get to do with so many amazing folks in this room, is to help them stay on the path, help them stay directionally correct.
Directionally correct, yeah.
And because we all know that that's a moving target in all of our lives. And I've heard reports back from the different waves that met yesterday afternoon that there was a lot of beautiful course correcting happening around discipleship, our own personal discipleship.
Yep.
And the hardest person to lead is ourselves. And so I didn't want to let this moment go by
No
without.
doubt. Thank you. George?
Yes, sir.
Why don't you take a stab at this one too? How can we leverage our network to make our churches stronger than the sum of our parts?
Not to be snarky, I think that's what we're doing. I mean, I think that's what the idea is, that we are better together. And it really is. There's Matthew's dad had this. He's the first one I ever heard say this. He's the one who said to our old covenant group, he said, "You got to." I'd put my arm around a pastor and say, "Boy, you've sucked all the juice out of the lemon. It's time for a new appointment." His dad was a superintendent, and I think we have to suck all the juice out of the lemon of the network. I mean, the network is us, and there's amazing resource in this room, and it's, for some of us, it's picking up the phone and saying, "Can I have a Zoom call with Dale Locke, who's a church planter in year 29, started in the living room, and there's some of you that the wisdom you need is in the deposit of Dale. Some of you need to call Judy or Lee, who are starting a new church, but in a whole new way." I'm privileged to coach with Judy and Matthew with Lee. And what they're doing there in the burbs of Atlanta in really reshaping how we think about discipleship and what church looks like. And so I would say that the sum is greater than the parts, and it's in the room, and it's actually taking advantage of it. It's having the initiative to step in. When I first met Craig and he led us through a process of building an operational team, and some of you have done that little exercise where they think of the best person in the world to call, and then try to figure out a way to call them. Pastor West could tell you we got one phone call away from talking to President Obama about him coming when he was president to do something in our community that would have helped our community around the recession. So the resources are there. We're 7 degrees of separation from the resource we need, and it might just be in this room. And so I think how do we leverage it is based on our willingness, maybe even our courage, to say to somebody in this room, "Would you come and help me?" Would you just, I no longer pastor a church, but I would just say, I'll help any church in the network do anything, within reason. I'm not gonna pay your mortgage or anything like that.
George will help you with anything. That's all I heard.
No. Within reason. But I'm just saying. But
his phone number is.
No. We're not going there. I'm just saying. I just know that there's that it's here. When I was out persecuting our tribe in a previous life, I would say that the gold is in them their pews. We just have to figure out how to mine it out. And I would say that the gold is in them there chairs right here. This is the gold. And the person that can help you take your next step in your leadership in your church to making more maturing disciples is not in Nashville or it's right here. It's right here. Well, it might be in Nashville. We got some great folks from Nashville. Angela, I meant Angela. I don't know about the two goobers over there. But,
Travis just raised his hand. I think he will help you with anything.
Thanks. He'll help you with anything.
Good. So we have two more questions up here, and the question reads, don't we need teams to get things done? And it's an adaptation of a question that was sent to us. And the answer to that particular question is that if you're building a team and you're not planning on getting anything done, then it's one of those things that probably should go away. And so yes, absolutely. And oftentimes the L3 process can feel really slow, especially to new people. And the rhythm typically is, in the beginning, you get people asking, like, you spend how long together? That's the normal opening phrase by people being invited into the process. It's never the question at the end of the process. Never. There will be people that drop out, but it tends to be because it's not really how they're wired, or it's because they aren't mature enough to be a part of that team and they're asked to go. But it's almost never around the time that it takes. And what people find is that it is enormously valuable. And because we're using the phrase team, it gets confused with committees and small groups, and the definitions in people's heads that they've experienced over years and years and years don't jive with the work that we're doing. And so the answer to that is absolutely yes. Matthew, you want to take the next question?
Sure, because I'm a little bit hardwired, and therefore it bleeds over into the organization here for things to move quickly. And there's a wonderful phrase that Wes has taught all of us that we need to embrace, and that is relaxed tenacity. I thought it was a beautiful way to put what I would have described as a sense of urgency. And so whether it's a sense of urgency or relaxed tenacity, however you want to phrase that, that is the prevailing culture that you want to create within your churches, within your organizations, is that healthy, holy discontent about where we are and the urgency about where we need to go. And so I've found that on teams, that after you've attempted to create what we talked about yesterday, psychological safety, so that they can do that in a healthy way, then there's two things that have to happen, and that is a picture of how discontent you are where you are currently residing. And second, a picture of what things will look like if that team actually achieves its goals and purposes and mission and vision. And I found that even more compelling than painting a picture of where you're going is creating clarity around how much dissatisfaction should be in the room about where you currently are. I go through a process with some people I coach. It's called the CORE process, C-O-R-E. And you can use this in your own personal development as well as your team development. And so the C of CORE is clarify current reality. Clarify current reality. The O is outline steps to a preferred reality. outline steps to a preferred reality. R is relentlessly eliminate self-limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And E is enthusiastically pursue the steps you outlined to your preferred future. Now, there's two rather difficult letters in that process. And the first one is the C, clarification of current reality. Because we're often in a state of denial, or we've got blinders on, or we're not asking the right questions, or we're not talking to enough people, we're not taking enough of the pulse of the organization. And a lot of times we have a hard time getting clarity around our current reality. We like to lie to ourselves, or we believe the press, the good press sometimes, and we let it overshadow and create those blinders about what really is not working right. And so that's one of the difficult of the core letters. But among the O and the R and the E, what do you suppose is the next most difficult?
Can you say the E one more time?
The E is enthusiastically pursue the steps you outlined to the preferred reality. The hardest is the R. Relentlessly, ruthlessly eliminate self-limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. We all woefully underestimate how much we have self-saboteurs that kneecap us. Now, Wes loves to talk about the Smurf village as his self-saboteurs. And he has to reconcile the little Smurf village in his head. But every single one of you have self-sabotage going on. And these self-limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And sometimes you don't know them. Sometimes the people closest to you know them better than you do. Oftentimes it takes good therapy to begin to identify your self-limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. But you put the cap on yourself so much in that process, and your teams that you're trying to move quickly, because your organization has those same self-sabotaging thoughts. I'll give you just a little example about that. Close to 40 years ago, when I moved to First United Methodist Church of Lake Alfred. And when I arrived there, let me put it this way. About a week before I arrived there, I came to meet with their leadership board, their administrative board, and just kind of to get to know and to talk about the future and such. And now this was a church of about 72 in attendance. And Lake Alfred at that time was a negative population growth town. It was not growing, it was not plateaued, it was declining. And so I came in to meet with them. My wife Maisie was with me, and we talked, we shared, we got to know each other. And then we began to talk about what they saw, what they envisioned for their church. And it became rather quickly evident to me that they had a script they had written for themselves. As a small church, a declining church, a church that was just in maintenance mode, maybe even survival mode. And I said to them, well, it's interesting because I believe that by this fall, we're going to need to add a second service. And they looked at me like I had three eyes. Because they were, again, averaging 72 people, and it was over a 200-seat sanctuary. And it just kind of blew their minds, and they thought, we've been appointed an idiot. And they may have been, but I just began to speak that into them. And by that fall, within 3 months, we needed to add a second service. not because I was such a great preacher or communicator or leader, but because I spent those whole 3 months just helping them to change the script they had in their head of who they were. They had so many self-limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors about what they thought they could be in the community. So just small example. There was a lot of other stuff to unpack on that particular instance. Now, the O, outlining steps to your preferred reality, that's actually the easier part. That's the easiest of everything. And then the differentiator, however, the game changer, is the E. To enthusiastically or energetically pursue those next steps. And this is where good coaching comes in. Because most persons and most organizations who don't have a coach, an objective third party who's holding them accountable in a healthy way to the goals they said they want to pursue, don't get things done. But individuals and teams, entire organizations that have a coach, get things done typically. And that's the differentiator. Because you think you'll enthusiastically, you'll think you'll energetically pursue all those steps. You don't. And that's just simply my encouragement about helping teams move a little more quickly, is to get really clear about the core of what you're aiming. And part of that is just another way of talking about building a map.
Nailed it. Corey, question for you. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing with Next Gen Ministries.
Well, as the simple-minded tech person on this team, I don't speak as eloquently as these gentlemen. So the answer to that question is, I don't know. We don't have the data, as Craig was saying. We're still developing that data. We're new to farming all of that data. But what we do know is that there are several folks sitting in this room right now that have made the maturing piece the keystone of what they do, and making any generation accountable and being accountable to the ministry. That's a simple answer from the tech guy. So,
It's a good one. And as we're moving along, it'll be one of the more challenging things, I think. You're looking at age level ministries. I'm not sure whether the young age or the old age will be more challenging, but as we're looking at so much data around Gen Z these days, it may be one of the easier spots for us just to start our expectations at, we're heading towards mature. Welcome. And get that going. So we have a lot to learn on that, and we'll be back with more info on that as we learn about it, and we're counting on you all to help us figure that out. So.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Do you see that there's an expectation that we will be, as a network, discovering metrics together for Next Gen and defining that?
Yeah, and I'll speak a little bit more to that even in this next question. And I did not pay him. But choosing metrics is really important, and I'm going to try to use the definition of a metric as a tool, measurement as a tool, not the thing itself. It really is going to be an increasingly important function of all of our teams to know if they're on track or not. That's the purpose of having the metrics. If you've built a good core, if you've built a good map, then you're going to want to know if the strategies that you've picked, the O, is actually driving you towards what you're hoping for. And so we've been using metrics in all kinds of different ways, and we've got all kinds of different language around it. And in part, it's because you've been asked to collect data on things that nobody cared about. And it's caused all kinds of problems. You really do not want to collect data that is not going to generate wisdom.
Say that again.
You really don't want to collect data on anything that does not generate wisdom. That's the purpose of gathering information. That's the purpose of measurement. And so it's a much longer topic than we have time to do today on all the ways to get at this. And so I'm trying to stay focused on kind of the big overarching element of this and really talk about the fact that when things get bogged down, when things become idols, it's more about the strategies than it is the metrics themselves. So for example, you've heard probably 1,000 times that a tractional model of church may not have been the best idea. Well, what they're really talking about is the strategy of attracting people. They're not actually talking about the number of people that came into the building. And the reason I'm separating that is that I want us to get better and better and better at innovation, at learning new ways to do the work, the core work of discipleship. And so we have some pretty cool examples here in the room of some pretty dramatically different approaches to church. And there are a couple in here, Anthony, where in order to become a member of the church, you have to start with mature. You have to be willing to be held accountable. It's a very different approach than how most everybody else in the room began their churches. And time will tell, but if I was a betting man, I'm putting my money that is where we will see an explosion of growth, an explosion of health, as you see disciples doing the heavy lifting of disciple making. And so that's just a guess, but it's a strategy. And Sunday morning is a strategy, folks. It is not the church itself, it's a strategy. And it is what has brought me to this point in time. It's what brought most of you all to this point in time, is participation in a Sunday morning service. So you can't just say it's a bad strategy. That's not okay. But the question is it the best strategy? Is it a complete strategy? And the way we figure those things out is by measuring. So I'd like to suggest that in our definition here in the network, that measurement is a tool that we're using to try to determine if our strategies are working or not. The strategies that you saw on the screen just moments ago were asking the question, is the network doing the things that it should be doing? You'll notice that none of your name showed up in those graphics, because it wasn't measuring that. It was trying to generate wisdom to ask the question, are we as the network doing the right things that we're doing? Are our strategies correct? And we've got to keep asking that question. And if we don't measure, then my intuition as a heroic solo leader, I'm going to press upon your idea of what it is. And when you have a team, if you're going to have a shared understanding of the reality, then you are going to have to measure. It's just as easy as that. I want to tell just a really quick story. And it's a story of a small church in Abilene, Texas. And I'm sitting with a group of leaders from that church. And they're a very diverse, representative group. And I asked, so how's your church doing? And to a person, they all saw it differently. Every single one of them. There was the couple that was in the exploding, wonderful, elderly Sunday school class that just thought it was the best thing that had ever happened. There was the frustrated youth leader and their co-leader thinking, oh my gosh, this thing is tanking and all of our kids are leaving. And right around the room, depending on where they were situated in that church, they had different perspectives. And in their journey to become one team, where they could be trusted to really share in the burden of responsibility, they had to figure out where the reality was. We're back to core. That's right. So the context section of that map, we got busy, sent them out with clipboards to go to different parts of the church and learn. And when they came back, then they had a more consistent idea to build their strategies upon. So I just want to be really clear that I don't think it's our numbers that are the issue. It's our strategies that we tend to And if we don't keep up with our values, all our strategies will become all kinds of things that we never intended them to be. And it is rare to walk into a room full of clergy where you don't compare size of your church. Well, that's gamification, right? And we're not trying to do that. We're trying to suggest that the movement of God looks different in different places. And what we're trying to figure out is whether we're on a healthy course or not. So enough said on metrics for just a moment. There's a question that's been floating around in our questions a little bit here as of late. It's a question that we have addressed in the past, that we will be addressing again. And the question is, how does ordination work? And here's what I want to say about things like this that we will bump into over time. Is the network is not trying to recreate an environment that we've been a part of before. That's not our goal. And our goal is not to try to build something big that's hungry that needs to get fed over and over and over again. What we are trying to figure out is where can the network be helpful to groups of people in the network to do things more efficiently and more effectively. And so we're going to spend some more time talking about it. And this conversation has been worked out individually over the last couple of years, and there's been some different approaches to it in the network, but it's really been individualistic across the churches, would be a fair way to say it. But we're going to take another look at it and see if there's some things that we've learned in the last year or two that would allow the network to do this more as a group. And we're also seeing some benefits from that as well. It's 9:52, Matthew. Will you take a stab at this question?
When the Sanctification Project began to gel in 2020, we at that point did not have any notion about where it was actually headed. When it became more clear to us that the Lord was speaking to us and we were gathering more clarity around discernment and hearing from others who were interested in what we were experiencing, we began to realize that it really did need to move beyond that original group, and we decided, you're welcome, to birth a network and to see how we might be able to move these more maturing disciples' heartbeats that we had into a movement, into something that was movemental. And so we began the process of creating an actual legitimate network. And thanks to Craig and Corey and some others in the process, we actually created the Sanctification Network as an entity with its own articles of incorporation, as well as bylaws, bank account, and, legitimate. Okay? It's the real deal. And as we've been doing that, which is very fresh, understand, it's very fresh, we've begun to work out our operational identity as opposed and distinct from SLI. SLI, Spiritual Leadership Incorporated, simply has been the default method and organizational bucket for where we were over those first 5 years. And that's because of Craig and Julian and the teams that just kind of helped the process get going and providing coaches for these waves. Now we're going to be entering into a new realm where your primary interface, organizationally, administratively, is going to be directly with the Sanctification Network. And then the network is going to be outsourcing, if you will, the coaching management process to SLI. And we'll be dealing with other vendors as well as, business insurance and all the things we do for legal fees and things like that for an incorporated entity. So, Sanctification Network will be the default. SLI will be a partner of the network providing the coaching resources and services and the management thereof. Does that make sense?
It was beautiful, man. We've got one more question, and Ron, we're going to ask you to help us with this one.
I think that's the perennial question, right? As you're trying to make more and maturing disciples, how do you get leaders? We run out of leaders very quickly. Back in 2018, we were trying to fill campus pastor position. We have a small campus 20 miles south of Cape Girardeau, and we had a hard time finding a campus pastor to lead that, which led to conversations with Craig, who's been my coach for the last 8.5 years, and led to this creation of this thing called the Spiritual Leadership Generator, which was at the beginning a partnership between Asbury and SLI to provide not quite seminary level training, but really high level training for leaders in the church to generate a movement of leaders. At LaCroix, we created this, we called it a leadership capacity map, because we knew that we could only go as far as our leadership capacity. And we were one of 2 beta churches with the Spiritual Leadership Generator. Now, it's evolved over the past few years. It keeps getting stronger, keeps getting better. Roger is now leading our 3rd iteration at LaCroix. And I highly recommend the Spiritual Leadership Generator as one tool to get more leaders. It has been a 40-week process, or 10-month. It's now, I think the new is 32 weeks. They keep refining, keep making it stronger, better. It consists of small groups gathering together. We have 3 currently that are meeting, and Roger is coaching them. He's come to town twice, and folks have raved about those retreats. And we are trying to crank out more and more leaders. But this is a way that we have begun doing it, and if you want to check into it, I think it is a fabulous leadership development tool. Very Wesleyan. It is intended to teach spiritual leadership in the Wesleyan way to people in your church. And we are already seeing people who graduate from that step into it. One of the key things we're trying to do with this leadership generator is get people in touch with their calling. And what we're working on now is how do we stay connected with them, hold them accountable to what they feel God is calling them to do. You know, it's not just pastors and missionaries that get called. You believe that, right? We all believe that. There are people in your church with callings of various kinds. How getting them in touch with their calling. You've got a large number of folks who that's happening with. You'll have the leaders you need. Now, do we have enough leaders at LaCroix? No, we need more. That's why we're planning another round of the Spiritual Leadership Generator. In fact, just appointed a person to kind of coordinate this so that we're very intentional, not only about recruiting the right people to get in the generator, but also staying in touch with those who have, so that we collectively are holding them accountable to the calling of God on their life. Now, there are other ways to do that, but that's how we've chosen.
For me, this is as exciting as it gets, thinking about this next season of our journey. And we've all seen how not to do the development of leaders. We've all tested several things that did not work. I'm trying not to go down my snark path just again right now. But thank you all so much. We're going to transition to our next thing here, but keep your questions coming. And if they don't get answered in your waves, keep asking, and we'll do our very best to learn and grow as we go. Thank you all.